Contrary.
Well, I'll have to hear the testimony and I'll make a ruling. All right, we ready for a jury?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's have jury input.
Your Honor, the one thing I would ask is for a brief rebuttal, sir.
I'm gonna allow you recross on this topic.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Jury in the room.
All right, everybody be seated, please. Mr. Brent.
Mr. Santos, I first want to ask you about the report Mr. Fuchs cited when he was cross-examining you. You were actually evaluated twice on July 31st, or on or around July 31st, 2017, correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you recall that Dr. Hudson, who did the evaluation, produced a report?
My attorney sent me a copy of it. However, I don't quite remember everything about it.
Do you recall, well, may I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may. This has been marked Defense Exhibit 28, is that what we're referring to?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Santos, can you take a look at that report and see if you recognize that to be the report that was completed following Dr. Hudson's mental health evaluation of you in 2017?
Yes, sir.
Does it appear to be a fair, true and accurate depiction of that report?
Yes, sir.
Or at this time, I'd request to move into evidence what's been marked as defense 28 and is defense 28.
This is my understanding, there was no objection.
That is correct, Your Honor. I'd like clarification about the dates of this one. It said August of 2017. Clarification that it predates the other one that was already introduced.
Yeah, yes, sir. So for clarification, Mr. Santos, it looks like the evaluation was done on July 31st. The date of the report is August 1st, 2017. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
That 28, Defense Exhibit 28 will be admitted.
Mr. Santos, based on his evaluation, did Dr. Hudson ultimately opine that you demonstrated a factual and rational appreciation of the legal process with no evidence of a mental illness or intellectual deficit, further finding that you have an agenda for providing testimony which is consistent with your philosophies, lifestyle, and life history? Is that all correct?
Yes, sir.
What is Dr. let me ask you, what did you tell Dr. Hudson to give him that opinion? How was your testimony about this case consistent with your agenda and your philosophies?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. One has the narrative, two is hearsay out of court statement.
Overruled.
My objective here is basically to clear my name with my organization so that I can walk a clear compound and not have to go into protective custody, which I haven't done my entire sentence.
So the point of your testimony is to let your organization know that you weren't responsible for the thefts?
Exactly.
Okay. Mr. Santos, were you communicating with Brandy via U.S. mail in the days leading up to her murder?
Yes, sir, I was.
Okay, first witness,
You
John.
may.
Do you know how many times you wrote Brandy?
No, sir, I have no idea. I know it was a lot, but I don't remember it.
Almost every day in the 10 days or so leading up to her murder?
Yes, sir.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
For record purposes, I'll call this defense composite 29. Do you recognize those?
Yes, sir. That's my handwriting.
Look through them and kind of scan them all to make sure that those are a true and accurate depiction of the letters you wrote, Ms. Peters.
Luckily it is, yeah.
It is a lot.
You've had a chance to review them? Are those a true and accurate depiction of the letters you sent?
Yes, sir.
All right. And these were all addressed to 908 Saddle Creek Drive, correct?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Santos, would you agree that?
So you're offering 29?
Yes, sir. I would request at this time to move into evidence what was marked as composite 29 and as defense composite
I
29.
understand the mistake, this is not a check,
Correct, Your Honor.
it'll be admitted.
Mr. Santos, the letters themselves appear superficially incomprehensible. What were you trying to accomplish with those?
A lot of the letters are pretty much coded. I was trying, in federal prison, you can't seal your mail. Your mail is read going out and coming in, so you have to be very careful on what you write and how you write it.
So, with respect to the kind of incomprehensible language, what is it that you were trying to communicate through the coded messages?
In some of my letters, I was explaining about exotic cars. If you notice, I spoke about cars that were at our disposal for rental to let her know that the business was still being conducted. And in a couple of my letters, I was speaking about money that was moved around or money that was owed by her. And in one of, I think it was an email I might have sent where I was talking about,
We're talking about letters now.
oh, in one of the letters I explained about money, that if she could return $50,000 and take one trip, then the debt would be paid. I had the car waiting for her in Atlanta. I was looking for her to take the trip before Thanksgiving of 2010.
I see. So, when you're talking about a car, those are things that you're promising to Ms. Peters in order to get her to go to Atlanta?
Yes,
Were you also communicating with Ms. Peters in the 10 days or so, couple of weeks leading up to her murder via email?
yes, sir.
And that was from the Federal Detention Center over on Capitol Circle?
Yes, sir.
You weren't using your own Corling's account though, were you?
No, sir.
Whose were you using?
I was using another inmate, so I don't remember his name due to the fact that he had a nickname. I just remember he was from Jacksonville and caught a case in Tallahassee. Him and his brother were together. But
Okay. May I approach the witness, John?
You may?
Call this. For identification purposes, we'll call this the Defense Composite Exhibit 30. Can you take a look at those and tell me whether that you recognize them to be the emails that you exchanged with Brandy Peters in the weeks leading up to her murder?
yes,
And do they appear to be a true and accurate depiction of those emails?
yes, sir.
Okay. I want to ask you some questions about what you were trying to accomplish with these. So again, in these emails, you're referencing that she'll be given $50,000 cash and a Mercedes Benz.
Yes, sir.
Is that what you were promising her if she would do this trip to Atlanta?
Yes, sir.
And you're also requesting that she get a hold of somebody who you were claiming was your father, a Dr. Yusuf Ali Bey.
Yeah, Dr. Yusuf Ali Bey passed away in 2003, so that was a whole nother spill. That wasn't getting directly in contact with him. He was already dead.
So what did that mean then? What were you trying
His
to accomplish?
son, Yusuf Bey the fourth, was the guy that handled a lot of my business. I was trying to get her to get in contact with him, actually.
Was he one of the people that you anticipated being involved in her murder?
No, he's one of the people that I anticipated being able to get her to pay back the money.
I see. So even as late as November, you were still willing to try to have her pay the debt off. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What would have happened if she had gone to Atlanta like you wanted?
More than likely, she probably would have been killed.
Because she wouldn't pay it back?
Yes, even if she had paid, she had already stolen it. She had already taken it.
So you wanted to try and recoup money and also kill her.
Exactly.
Your Honor, at this time, I would request to move into evidence which has been identified for identification as Defense Composite 30 and as Defense Composite 30.
Subject,
Yes, Your Honor.
what's that?
Yes, Your Honor, previously said.
But do you want to be heard as to anything specific? So we'll go sidebar.
No, Your Honor, just previous
Right.
objections.
I'll admit Defense Exhibit 30.
Mr. Santos, Mr. Fuchs covered a lot of ground with you relating to other presumably false confessions, claims that you've made. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yes, sir.
And have you made false confessions before?
I think so, yes, to a detective, to a state detective.
Why did you do that?
For one, I didn't want to talk to him. That's the one thing. And another, I feel as if they feel that I'm sort of unbalanced or whatnot, then they wouldn't charge me. At the time, I didn't want to be charged. So if they felt that I was unstable, they wouldn't take me serious and charge me with this crime.
So you're both trying to let your associates know that you took care of the debt?
Took care of the business and at the same time finding leeway for myself.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Fuchs as to the letters or email.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Santos, these letters are numerous, and there's a lot of conversation in them. But essentially what we're talking about in these letters is numerous times you're talking about the fact that you own franchises of Steaks and Shakes and Burger Kings, right?
Yes, that's
And you're assuring her that you're a good financial means and that you've got money and assets adding up to over $18 million, right?
yes. None of that is directly dealing with a Steak and Shake or a Burger King, though. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that's totally something different then, right?
Yes, this is all
These
business.
rambling letters are all code.
Yes, sir.
Did you have a code book where Ms. Brandy can decipher what these ramblings are?
No, there's no book for it. We all, everybody in my organization pretty much understands when we say franchise, if we say Burger King or Steak and Shake or McDonald's, people automatically understand what I mean.
We only met Brandy twice, and
Yes.
you recruited her.
Yes.
So you've only been with her once on one of these trips. She's not really a part of your organization. She's just basically a mule, isn't she?
Well, once you become a driver, you tend to become a member of the organization. You're part of the family. So you understand the lingo. You understand that when we say franchise, we're talking about a group of different cartels working together. If I say, hey, listen, right now I'm doing business with Burger King, that means that I'm working with Las Zetas. If I say I'm doing business with Pizza Hut, that means I'm working with a completely different cartel. If I'm saying I'm doing business with multiple franchises, then I'm doing business with a lot of different groups at one time. That means when you go to Texas and pick up a load, you're picking up a load that belongs to maybe 3 different cartels, or maybe 4 different cartels.
All right, and when you told her you had a degree from Kuwait, is that to ensure that she could fly to Kuwait to pick up a drug case, some drugs?
No, that's a guy from Kuwait that I had come to Tallahassee. In fact, if you would check the record, he visited me. It was the only visit I got on Capitol Circle. He came and visited.
And you repeatedly tell her, you tell them that your father is Nigerian and your mother is Colombian. I assume that that's supposed to mean that
A Nigerian guy and a Colombian guy are going to be meeting you. If you go back to my beginning testimony in this case, when I first started testifying in this case, I spoke about my Nigerian friend. I spoke about my Colombian friend a few times.
the Nigerian friend that was sending me the emails about wanting to loan me money, right?
No,
Okay.
not that friend.
All right, different friend. You tell her that you've been flying Boeing aircraft since the 1990s.
Yeah, these planes that we're speaking about is planes that's coming from Colombia to Mexico.
Okay. Isn't it true, Mr. And these are in evidence, jury can read them, but isn't it true that essentially what you did is you got a address for Brandy Peters from someone else in prison, Kalo or whoever it was, and you just started writing her letters. And you're starting to write her letters for the purposes of trying to get her to marry you and think you're a good person. And in fact, in one of the letters, you talk about the fact and you explain that you're not going to call her, but if you do, it'll only be a couple minutes, so please try and answer those phones. So she's really not responding to your phone calls, she's not responding to your letters, and you're just trying to get her to marry her and talk about how great you are because you have assets of Steak and Shakes and $18 million. Isn't that true?
No, sir.
No, it's not.
And I actually spoke to her a few times on the phone, if you recorded the phone conversations. We talked a few times.
And basically, essentially what you did is you got her address and you sent her a bunch of nonsensical letters, just like you did with Mr. Edders, just like you did with the courts, just like you did with Judge Hankson, right?
No, sir.
Right.
Just one quick thing, Mr. Santos. What was the language pertaining to marriage about? What did that actually mean?
When we speak of marriage, it's pretty much I'm connecting a driver with somebody. I'm connecting you with a particular person that's running a particular detail, and the reason why we call it a marriage is because you two people are going to be working together. When I came to prison, I needed her to help me, and in the process of that, I hooked her up with my people. I introduced her to some people that she could drive for, that I trusted, and that was going to trust her because I trusted her.
Are the letters that you write with code intended to look nonsensical to somebody who doesn't
Of course,
understand?
it's supposed to. That way, when it's going out of the mailroom, the people don't pay it any attention when it's going out because it looks like a bunch of rubbish. But the person that's receiving it understands it. I got letters right now in the jail. If you read them, you wouldn't be able to decode them, but I can decode them. I understand what they mean.
Yes, sir. No further questions.
All right, hey, Jerry, I have a question of this way. All right, take Mr. Santos in. Call your next witness.
This time you're over the Cruz.
Okay.
Some point in time, we need to get a little organization to the letters and the emails.
Yes, sir.
Y'all can do that, last, we
Yes,
want
sir.
to make the jury sit here, we want to figure that out. You raise your right hand and be sworn, please.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Have a seat, sir.
Can I get a glass of water? I got a heart.
You may proceed, Mr. Prince.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Dela Cruz, can you please introduce yourself to the jury and spell both your first and last name?
Yeah, my name is Jesse de la Cruz. First name is Jesse. Last name is capital DE space capital LA space capital CRUZ.
And what do you do for a living?
I am a consultant, gang expert throughout the nation.
What does that mean?
That means that I'm called by attorneys throughout the United States to help them or assist them in alleged gang cases or where there is a possibility that gangs were involved in a case.
And can you describe for us both practical real-world experience and any education or training that you have as it relates to organized crime, gangs, or cartels?
Well, to start, I have a bachelor's in sociology with a minor in deviance. I have a master's degree in social work, also focusing on deviant behavior. I also have a doctorate in education with a scientific dissertation study on gangs as far as the education goes. As far as professionally, I've been involved doing this type of work since approximately 2001. I took a brief hiatus between 2001 and I think 2007, and then I got back into it, on a consistent basis up until now. Also, I have been involved I joined a gang when I was 13 years old. I thought about getting in when I was 12, but I actually got in at the age of 13. Committed my first crime dealing with gangs at the age of 13. I did a shooting. At the age of 16, I stabbed an individual and was sent to a boys' camp. At the age of 21, I arrived in the penitentiary, and I joined a prison gang organization. Prior to going to prison, I was living in Tijuana. I was running from the police. So I lived in Tijuana for about 9 months. Got connected with an individual by the name of Toñito and another by the name of Roberto, who at that time were the big drug dealers in Tijuana. We were importing heroin from Juarez, Mexico into California during that time as well, and dealing with a lady by the name of Nacha, La Nacha they called her. She was the grandma, but she was in charge of all of basically the crime in Juarez, Mexico. Now at that time they were not called cartels because they hadn't evolved yet. When I got out of the penitentiary after, 5 years or so, whatever it was, in 1976, 77, around there, I went to Los Angeles. I lived in Los Angeles, and I was dealing with one of the Felix brothers who is or was in charge of the Tijuana cartel. By this time, they were called cartels. So I've had interactions with him, off and on, up until the age of 45, when I quit breaking the law. I was involved in the crime milieu every day of my life up until that time. Every day I interacted with people who were involved in some form or another in either gangs or crime, and because I was a criminal, and that's what I did for a living. I woke up every morning with the sole intent of breaking the law. I was not I didn't talk to the police, I didn't talk to law enforcement or district attorneys, I didn't talk to regular people, well, maybe regular people from the neighborhood, but I didn't go outside the neighborhood or outside the Latino community as far as my interactions. So my interactions and my experiences with crime and people that deal with crime is pretty in depth. I also have a pretty large family, and we do have a few doctors and we do have a few nurses and professionals, but we also have a lot of individuals who are involved to this date, actually, in crime, specifically 2 nephews that are currently involved in cartel business, the business of drugs in Dallas, Texas. Another nephew who is currently in the state penitentiary in Texas, who was involved out of Houston. I also had a cousin who was a member of the Zeta cartel, who I contacted back in, I don't know, maybe 3 years, 2.5 years ago, prior to him getting shot by the Mexican federales in a shootout in Reynosa, Tamaulipas. And he was a member, in fact, of the Zetas. And I had a discussion concerning this particular case, but that's, in a nutshell, my experience
Okay.
with crime.
In addition to your real-world experience and family experience with cartel activity, have you studied that behavior and the nature of their criminal enterprises as well?
I've studied all gangs. I started studying gangs and cartels in 1997 when I started going to school. I went to school for 10.5 years, and for 10.5 years, my focus, apart from the academic work that I had to do, psychology, sociology, whatever, mathematics and all that, every opportunity that I had was in studying gangs, cartels, and the differences, the similarities, how they evolved, where they started, and so forth and so on. And of course, in the community, and this is what a lot of people don't understand, a lot of people that are not Latinos, and they don't understand that in the Latino community, most everybody has an understanding about the cartels and about gangs. You hear law enforcement say that they're afraid of gangs. They're not really afraid of them. They don't like them, but they understand them. And so everyone knows somebody that knows somebody who's connected to some kind of cartel or some kind of street gang. So on a daily basis, most of the time, I'm in the neighborhood or dealing with agencies that deal with, gangs and so forth and so on. And gangs are connected to the cartel directly. Not every gang, but big gangs like 18th Street, Malas Salvatruchas, and so forth and so on. They are connected to them because they do business with them.
Well, I'll ask you to come back and explain that in more detail in a little bit here. I want to ask you about some of the methodologies utilized during your academic career and during your postdoctoral work. Have you conducted first-person interviews with people actually involved in cartel activity?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, this is another. What I'm trying to explain is that I have an aunt, my mother's sister, who was married to an individual who is in a cartel from Michoacán, the cartel La Familia Michoacana. So the entire family is involved. The entire family, the mother, everybody. And so, and I know him. I know all the brothers. I know because the guy Jose was married to my Aunt Rachel. And so, not too long ago, Rachel's daughter, my cousin, told me that.
Objection, Your Honor, we're getting into hearsay.
Let's not get into the substance of
Okay.
what you were told, please.
Okay.
Dr. Dela Cruz, are first-person interviews with individuals possessing firsthand knowledge of cartel activity in the academic community, is that a generally recognized method or practice for gathering information upon which opinions can be formed?
Absolutely.
Okay. What kind of other methods do you utilize to gather and gain information as it pertains to cartels and cartel activity?
Well, the internet is a wealth of information now. A lot of the information is not reliable, but a lot of it is. So you can ask Google anything you want now. Some of the information that it provides to you is not accurate, but a lot of it is. Now, if you happen to be someone that understands gangs, understands cartels, understands their behavior and how they were evolved and so forth and so on, and their interactions, you'll be able to determine what type of information is reliable and which isn't. So I use the internet, I use individuals, I use interviews, I use academic journals. There's not a lot of information on academic journals concerning cartels specifically. And the reason that being said is because it's a dangerous job to go into and talk to cartel members, right? So there's not a lot of academic information on them.
So when you're utilizing the internet to gain information, how do you go about differentiating between unreliable posts or articles as opposed to scholarly or properly sourced documentation?
Well, first of all, if I want to find out something about the cartels and I look up, let's say, the Sinaloa cartel or the Zetas, based on the information that I have, right, and that I know from personal experience, I can determine, okay, this is reliable, and then I take that information into the neighborhood or wherever, and I call I got a lot of contacts in different places, Texas, New Mexico, different places, and I call them and I say, so what about this? And then they begin to say, okay, well, this is what happened, and then so they're reliable in that they're still involved. They're still involved in the criminal underworld, and so I tend to believe them based on my experience. Now, I know that law enforcement can't do that because, people like that won't talk to law enforcement, and therefore they don't understand that. How can I do it and not them?
So utilizing first-person interviews sounds like is the best method that you've focused on for gathering information as it relates to cartels and cartel activity?
And as it relates to any type of criminal activity, actually, because it's qualitative. It's a scientific methodology that has been recognized by both the experimental, which is quantitative, laboratory, Dauber motion kind of stuff, as opposed to the experiential, the experience, culture, interviews, observations. That's qualitative.
So the qualitative or experiential information gained is an accepted method within the scientific community as well?
It's accepted by both scientific communities.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about your doctoral research.
So initially, I started off with, I wanted to, the first year of my dissertation, I was looking at the difference between African American, Crips and Bloods. I was looking at North and South Latinos, because in California you have Norteños, Sureños. And then I was looking at Vietnamese and Cambodians gangs, and what was the differences and the similarities. However, about a year after doing a tremendous amount of research, I presented my idea to my dissertation chair, and she indicated that I was really talking about 6 dissertations, so that I needed to focus on one specific gang and one specific area. And so then what I decided to do was I decided to do the city of Stockton, because the city of Stockton at that time had a really high rate of murder in 2012. And they were alleging that it was as a result of gangs. And my information from the streets was that that was not true. So then I began to look at norteños or individuals that were from gangs that were considered Northern California. So initially I started off with 56 individuals. And I interviewed them all, and then I transcribed everything, and I presented it again to my dissertation chair, and she indicated that it was too big of a sample, and that I would have to whittle it down. And so I said, well, what's the least and what's the most? And she goes, between 8 and 4. So I chose 4 to make it easier for me to finish.
And ultimately, did you obtain your doctoral degree as well?
I did.
In case you didn't already clarify, what degrees have you obtained?
It's on that particular. You mean when I was doing my dissertation?
Yes, sir.
It was a doctorate in education.
Okay. Which you've already clarified, focused on gang activity.
Correct.
Okay. In your work in your postdoctoral work, have you had an opportunity to specifically research the relationship between South American cartels, Mexican cartels, and American criminal street gang organizations?
I have.
And tell us about the methodologies you utilized to research those topics.
So this began, the connection between Colombian cartels, Pablo Escobar and them, the Medellin cartel, and Mexicans, which is in Mexico, not in America, in the United States, in Mexico, was started by Chapo Guzman, actually. And he made a business deal with them that he would, if they would provide the cocaine, then he would be the one.
Object. I think this is not letting the predicate specify as an expert.
I'll overrule the objection at this point, but let's not get into the substance
Okay.
too much of what
Right.
other people said. Right,
Well,
let's get to it.
Okay.
And I'll come back and ask you for specific opinions in a little bit here, but right now I just want to ask you about methodologies and things of that nature. So rather than getting into the content of what you learned about the relationship, what methodologies did you utilize to learn about the relationships between South American, Mexican cartels, and then American criminal organizations?
Well, I reviewed many different documents that you can go to a library and there's a plethora of information on Chapo Guzman and the Sinaloa cartel, as far as that goes. And of course, there's a lot of information on the internet that deals with them. And of course, I know a lot of people that were at one point involved in the distribution of drugs that were directly with the cartels in Mexico.
So books, scholarly articles, first-person interviews?
Correct.
Okay. As it relates to the Los Zetas cartel, have you ever had an opportunity to conduct first-person interviews with individuals who either were or are at the time of the interview members of the Los Zetas cartel?
Yeah, my cousin, he was a member of the Zetas. He had just, when I spoke to him, he had just gotten out after serving 10 years in the federal penitentiary for drugs, for bringing drugs into the United States. And I called him up and we had a discussion about he was no longer a member of the Zetas. Actually, they had broken off and they had started another cartel, which was called La Mancha, and he was a bodyguard for the main guy of that particular cartel. But he had been a Zeta for probably 15 years prior to his, moving over to another one.
So were you able to conduct first-person interviews with him that pertain to the Zetas' structure and business relationships with both Colombian and Colombian cartels and American criminal organizations?
Yeah, I was able to talk to him concerning the operations as far as from Mexico to the United States, primarily. That was more or less our conversation. I didn't get too much into the Colombians with him. With him,
you say. Have you conducted first-person interviews with other individuals who have firsthand knowledge of the structure, organization, and business relationships for Colombian cartels?
No, not as it deals specifically with the Zetas, no.
Okay. Have you reviewed books or scholarly articles that pertain to, in general, the relationship between the Colombian cartels, Mexican cartels, and American criminal organizations?
Yes, there's a one book that was published probably like 6-7 years ago in Laredo, out of Laredo, Texas. Well, the kids were out of Laredo, Texas, and they were Zeta members, and they break down everything that deals with Colombians and how the connection they made, and how you become a Zeta member, how you become a hitman for the Zetas, the paramilitary style of operation, the historical background as far as that they started from the military and so forth. So it's called Wolf Boys. And if you read it, it's pretty interesting. And those guys killed 22 people by each of them, and are now serving time in the state prison in Texas.
And based on your training, education, and experience, have you ever been qualified to testify as an expert pertaining to gangs, cartels, or organized crime?
I have.
Approximately how many times?
Between 80 and 85 times, I think, somewhere in there. I couldn't tell you exactly the exact number, but quite a few.
And in addition to the times that you've been qualified in court to testify, have you consulted on more cases than that?
Yes, I have. Probably 700 to 750 cases throughout the United States.
And roughly how many of those specifically involved Mexican cartels?
Three. I believe about 3. One in Chicago, and I don't remember exactly. One in San Diego, I believe.
And have you further studied the relationship between Mexican cartels and American criminal organizations?
Oh yeah, I know quite a bit.
And what sources did you utilize to study that relationship?
Well, again, I'm pretty well known in California, so I do a lot of stuff in Los Angeles, because Los Angeles, San Jose, California, San Diego, the gangs in those cities, and smaller cities too, but primarily in those cities, they're connected. And when I say the gangs, I don't mean the gang as a whole. I mean individuals that are in that specific gang will pick 3 or 4 guys from that specific gang, and then they deal with the cartels, right? It's not the whole gang, so the whole gang is not involved. So that's the difference, right? So I know a lot of guys because I met a lot of guys when I was in the penitentiary for all those years that were involved directly with sales of drugs and exporting drugs and all that, the kind of stuff. And so I've kept contact with them, and they know what I'm doing. So when I call them, I ask them questions, and they tell me, okay, this is what's happening. I don't get into the specifics of crimes. I just want to know the connections between certain individuals and whether or not it's a gang-motivated crime, something like that.
So you've conducted first-person interviews pertaining to the relationship between Mexican drug cartels and American criminal organizations?
Oh, yes.
Okay. This time, Your Honor, I would tend to the witness.
You wish to retire?
Yes, Your Honor.
I'm not sure y'all met Mr. Evans. This is one of the assistant state attorneys.
Good morning. Good morning, Dr. Cruz.
Good morning, Mr. Evans.
Your dissertation, well, how old are you?
I'm an old guy. I'm probably older than you.
Probably, since
I'm 68,
you're 68. So
but I feel like I'm 38. I walk like I'm 100, but
yes, sir. So some of the gang activity you're talking about happened when you were 13 years old. So that would have been when?
Well, some of it, the first shooting I did for the gang I was 13 years old.
And what year would that have been?
Wow, my goodness, I was born in 1951, probably 1963, right around there,
Okay.
give or take a year.
And you've been out of the gang how long?
40 years.
Okay. Now, your dissertation was done when?
I completed it 2014, 5 years ago.
And that dissertation involved street gang in Stockton, California, is that correct?
That's correct.
And it related to what you were looking at was a relationship that the impact of law enforcement, community, family, schools had on gang members, how it, I guess, guided them or led them to be members of that gang. Is that correct?
I don't think guided or motivated them, but it was how it impacted them into making a decision into getting into a gang. I think that's what I was looking at.
All right, so that's what the focus was a small street gang in Stockton, California in 2014, and why they joined a gang.
Actually, it wasn't just one gang. It was 4 different gangs. So it was not that small. I mean, as far as, it was representative of the gang population in Stockton completely. So one gang was from Central Stockton, one gang was from the east side, one gang was from the south side, and one gang the members were from the west side. So these individuals were all representative of their gang in the city of Stockton, which is 300,000 people, and they claim they have 5,000 gang members, so it was representative of maybe 5,000 gang members.
Now, predominantly your testimony in other cases have been whether or not somebody was a member of a gang, is that correct?
Well, predominantly.
Which is what I asked you, so the answer to that question would be yes.
Well, no, because sometimes they are gang members, and we're trying to determine whether or not the crime was committed for the benefit of the gang.
Doctor, my question was,
And I said no.
it's predominantly.
And I said no.
So your testimony in other cases is not predominantly about whether somebody's a member of a gang or not.
It could be one or the other. It could also be something like this. So there are different cases. So predominantly, okay, you want to put a number on what? Maybe out of 700 cases, okay, let me give you a number. Out of 700 cases, probably, I guess it would be predominantly, because probably 550 were determining what you just asked.
Okay, so the answer to my question was yes.
That's correct.
All right, but you enlarged my question. My question involved testimony. You said you consulted on 750 cases, but you've only indicated you testified in about 80 or 85, correct?
Correct.
And of those 80 to 85 that you testified, how many of those related to the issue of whether somebody was a member of the gang?
Probably about 50, 55.
Okay. So predominantly,
Yeah,
the answer to that question would have been yes.
it would have been yes,
Okay.
or it is yes.
You're not qualified in crime scene interpretation, are you?
No,
And you've never testified as an expert in crime scene interpretation, have you?
that's correct.
And based upon what you, Mr. Prince's questions, that your discussions about what Zeta gangs do encompassed, you're talking solely to your cousin, who is now dead, is that correct?
Not specific, oh wait, I've talked to other people, but he was a member of the Zetas. That's what I meant by that, yeah.
But is he the only member of the Zetas you talked to?
Yeah.
Now, the other document, you've said you've also read stuff on the internet, articles and stuff on the internet, is that correct?
Correct.
Did you document what those articles were?
I think I documented it back at those, but it's been a long time, and I lost, I don't know, I misplaced all those documents, because it's been like 3 years, 4 years ago, so I misplaced them, but I did document.
The conversations you had with people as to whether or not they're gang members or anything else, did you record any of those conversations?
No, I didn't.
Did you take notes of those conversations?
I did take notes at the time, and once again, the file was misplaced. I don't know what I did with it, because I do a lot of stuff, so I'm not a very good file office keeper, and I don't have an office keeper, so I'm not sure what I did with the file, but I did take some notes concerning the conversation that me and my cousin had specifically.
All right, so there are no longer any notes, there are no longer any copies of any articles you may have read, and the people you talked to, you said you talked to, do you know their real names?
I know their real names. Their first names, I know their real names, yes.
You know their first real names, but you don't know their last names, do you?
Well, their last name is not important.
Why not?
Why? I don't need them.
So there is nobody, well, you don't need them, but there's no way for anybody to go behind you to ask them if they're going to give you the same questions as they gave you, is there?
Well, if it's going to be law enforcement to go behind me, they're not going to talk to you anyway. They don't talk to law enforcement. They talk to me because I am a former gang member, and they know me. They know my background. They know my history, because I'm pretty well known in the neighborhoods throughout California and Texas. So even if you wanted to go talk to them, they would not talk to you. So it's not important for me to get their names and their document, their data, because it's not going to provide, it's not going to help you. You're not going to be able to go in and ask them questions. They're not going to talk to you.
So there's no way to peer review your conclusions and opinions.
Well, we're not doing the scientific research, sir, so there's no peer review. This is all law enforcement. Peer reviews when you're doing academic research. We're not doing academic research here.
Have you written a paper where you document your sources, have your notes, and have submitted it for people to go behind you and independently confirm your conclusions?
I have not, sir. No, I have not. I'm not doing that type of research. I'm not doing academic research. This is specifically law enforcement in the courtroom. That's it. So I'm not trying to convince academia with anything.
I have no more questions on his qualifications, Your Honor, and would object to him testifying as an expert.
I'm allowed to offer an opinion. How long do you think it's gonna be, Mr. Prentice?
I think this would be a fine time to break here.
All right, while we break for lunch, let's plan to be back at 1:15, please. 1:15, right? Either side, anything further? No, Your
Your Honor, I can bring the bottle.
What?
I can bring some water.
Water? Yes.
Okay.